So, gentlemen, today's topic is made in USA. How important is it? How much, as a consumer of pedals, should this be a priority for you? And is there a marked difference in quality between something that is made in America versus made overseas? And I think in this, we might also add in another component to say, what about just country of origin? Like, obviously, not every company that makes pedals is based in the United States. So there are pedal companies based in Canada. There are pedal companies based in Europe, Japan, all over the world. So I guess maybe the more appropriate thing is made in USA or made in country of origin that is not potentially making, let's say, mass quantities at inexpensive prices. And maybe that's also a sort of stereotype we can also address to a degree. And just as an initial jumping off point, I'm thinking of like an Apple iPhone. Like, that's one of the most expensive cellular telephones that you can purchase that is completely made in China.
Designed in California, though.
Designed in California, as they point out, as does Eventide. They say designed in New Jersey.
Yep.
So I'm curious if we can maybe, for the listener, create sort of a baseline of where we each are on this particular topic. So just to refresh, kind of made in USA, made in North America, made in UK, made in the country of origin versus, let's say, made in China as sort of the polar opposite of that. Pedals being made there, qualities, concerns, kind of where is your initial starting point as we get into this discussion? Brian, start us off.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say starting off, like, I've had a lot of, I definitely, when I buy a pedal, the first thing I don't look at is where it was made, like the origin of where it was. I think there's like a level of like designing craftsmanship, and you can tell the quality of the unit or whatever it is depending like where it was built. I don't really lean towards it has to be like, when you see the, like, okay, how do I put it? There's a lot of units that are designed and stuff here, but then there just aren't that many facilities that can do those chips. So I'm not a manufacturer. You guys are the ones that do that. Like, you guys have pedals. So like, you have to source all the parts and everything. So I know that just comes from all over the place. But from like a player standpoint, it's not the first thing I look at personally. I think when I see it, it's like, oh, that's cool. Like, it's like going to a craft fair and everyone has made all their cool crafts there in that city and you're supporting your local city, like that kind of thing. But like, and like, that's cool. But like, I wouldn't say it's like a deal breaker for me. I just think there's certain places where things are designed, I will see a quality difference and I'll just kind of stay away from those personally. It just kind of depends, just because you also have to weigh the fact of where it's coming from, how easy it's going to be to logistically have tech support if something goes wrong with it. So that's my insight.
I'm not bothered by made in China at all. I think, and I don't know where the whole made in USA, made in Canada, made in Japan, I don't know where that necessarily came from or where it started, but I feel like it was, and maybe one of you guys know more about this, but I feel like it was probably more of a campaign started to get more jobs in said country, rather than it was maybe first that anything manufactured in China was inherently bad or low quality. I think it's up to the manufacturer. So Goodwood Audio, Vertex, Omilion, Boss, Fender. It's up to the manufacturer to set their standards of what they are willing to sell under their brand name And if they can find that quality, whether that's low quality or high quality, for a price they're happy with, then they will get it manufactured at that price, assuming they can make a profit and all that. And that's where some of our stuff comes from China, some comes from America, some comes from Canada. Like, we buy from all over the place. And what I've learned specifically from China, because that's where our conversation is centered right now, is there are companies in China that make horrible stuff. Like, the quality is shocking.
Yeah.
And there are companies in China that make unbelievable stuff. Specifically, a lot of the stuff I'm thinking about off the top of my head with pedals, you can get circuits populated and circuits printed in China, and the quality has beaten out anything I found in Australia. I won't say anything in America because I have very little experience since we're based in Australia. That's my main kind of point for comparison. But I'm paying 3 times as much for the same product in Australia, and I can get a better quality, cheaper, faster, delivered to my door from China for a third of the cost. And my error rates are down, like everything. But at the same time, I've found circuit designers and board houses in China that have been shockingly bad. And I think it's, in my mind, it's less about, is China bad? And it's more about, I think, like, I would love to flip the question. Is it possible for someone to create a low quality pedal made in USA? Of course, the answer is yes. And it's up to that company to decide if they're willing to put that out or not. And so, I am not bothered by made in China. I am bothered by companies that are willing to put out inferior products, touting them as being, these are amazing, they'll last you forever, when everyone knows they won't. And that can be made in USA, or it can be made in China, or it can be made in Japan. Mm-hmm. I think that's where I'm kind of sitting at as we get into the conversation.
Yeah. I think that is a very wise observation. As somebody on the manufacturing side, in just kind of taking a stab at the question, that I sort of proposed here, I'm pretty much in agreement with what you said. I think that it was probably a response to, like, speaking of the Made in USA sort of moniker. I think it's a response to trying to differentiate quality when a lot of the electronic stuff or fill in the blank industry started to go overseas. And that was, due to costs, trying to decrease the price of things. And I think that one thing that China can do that USA can't is that you can get, if you have a target price and you want something made, you can find somebody that will make it for you. And it will be commensurate with the quality of the product. But brands would come with a target price and say, well, I need to make this pedal for $5. And you will find somebody in China that will build that for you. In the USA, you will not find somebody who can build you that product for $5. And so, of course, it's inexpensive. Also, the quality is bad, Yeah. I don't think you can find that because labor is just, that's kind of like the big X factor, I think, when you're manufacturing in America comparatively to overseas. I've heard somebody, and I won't say who they are, but I've heard a major pedal manufacturer say that when they get quotes for manufacturing a product in China, that the Chinese don't even quote them labor. Like, the labor is such an indiscriminate expense that it is not even a factor in their quotation. They're really just quoting them for parts.
Wow.
And it's sort of the inverse in America. Like, the labor cost is quite expensive, and in your manufacturing and process engineering, you're attempting to find ways where you can expedite processes that are done by the human hand, so that you can have whatever is possible, either populated on a PC board by a machine or soldered by a machine. And then there may need to be certain parts that need to be, hand assembled because they can't be washed with other components on, let's say, the PCB or something like that. I think at the same time, as Grant has said, there can be amazing things that are made there. And I know it's not a pedal, but I mentioned earlier, like the iPhone or pretty much any Apple product is all made in China. And I know that some people hate Apple, on principle, but I think generally we understand their products to be quite good, and leading edge. And if you don't like Apple, you can fill in the blank for many of the other phones that exist out there, or computers, and they're equally made in China. So I think that if you want quality and that's what you're seeking, you can certainly have it done there. I think that the challenge also for some manufacturers is that, like, you can't do small runs in China typically. You have to be able to buy a huge quantity, because in order for them to be able to manufacture, if they're in this huge facility, you kind of have to be able to get the economies of scale of having a run of 1,000. So if you're in the USA and you're used to making 250 pedals in a run, that's going to be probably hard to pull off in China.
Yeah.
And it may not even be worth it from the point of view of getting it back here, and then having to, depending on how much of it you're doing in China. Are you having the full thing assembled and putting into a product box? Are they just doing the circuit board level stuff, and then you're coming back here and you're loading it into an enclosure and doing your own QC? And then there's tariffs associated with this as well. If you're getting stuff imported from China, there's a tariff with that. And if it's flown in, that's a pretty expensive thing. If it's done by boat, that's less expensive, but it could take months.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, I fall into the camp of, I don't let that be the determining factor as to whether I would buy something or not. I think that one thing everybody should be clear on is that every single component, for the most part, in every single pedal is likely made in China. When we're talking about capacitors, resistors, foot switches, and in some cases Taiwan, but they're definitely overseas. So, like, every 3-pole double throw switch, if it's an alpha switch, that's made in Taiwan. If it's an alpha pot, that's made in Taiwan. Most of your capacitors all made in Taiwan. Even your PCBs. Even if they're bought from an American company, they're likely made in China, because there's that process, it's not particularly environmentally friendly. There's not a lot of companies in America that can do it. And a lot of companies too will do fully loaded circuit boards in China, bring them back to the US, load them in an enclosure, and they can still, by the letter of the law, say made in USA, as long as that final assembly and QC and packaging is done here. So the heart of the product, being the circuit board, is all done there, and then they're getting something that's pretty much turnkey, putting it in the enclosure, loading it, testing it, So if they kind of, that last process is done here, it gets to be made from here. I'm curious what you guys think about that. Like, I'm not here to tattletale on anybody, but I would say that I know several major pedal companies where that is the way that they do it. They have runs of 1,000 PCBs made of a particular product. It's using the same parts that they would use if they made it here, but it's made overseas. They get a box, a shipment of, all these completed PCBs wrapped in, bubble wrap. They unwrap them, and then they load them into the enclosures here and test them here. Do you feel like they should still be saying made in USA, even though it's technically under the letter of the law of what they're allowed to say? Or do you think that that's sort of taking advantage of the definition? Does that give you do you have any feeling about that?
I would say just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
And I think it's misleading for people that, and some people really value, and there's no problem with this, they really value made in USA. And for especially electronics, I don't think you can have a product that really says made in USA anymore. I just don't, or maybe ever. I don't know enough about the history, but I do think it's very misleading. I think they could say assembled or tested or something else in USA.
I actually think that is what the definition is that it has to say assembled, because if even though they do say made in USA, I think made in USA, you actually are supposed to be able to prove that everything is
which
USA
for electronics is not going to happen.
Impossible. Yeah, it's impossible.
So yeah, I would be fine with assembled in USA. I think if you're like listening to this and you're actually wondering, I would hope that if you called up that company and said, hey, is what in your product line or what in the process is either made, assembled, order from China or countries outside the USA, I would hope that they would at least give you like a generic or a general is a better word. All of our PC components for the most part are, bought from a USA manufacturer who buys it from China. Our PCB boards are soldered in USA or, whatever. I would hope that they would give you some sort of idea. They aren't going to go into part numbers, but some sort of idea of just being transparent on that front. Whether or not they will or not, I have no idea. But if that's something you're concerned about, I think you should actually call it the manufacturer or the pedal company and ask them. I know I would be I would have no problem saying that. We get our PCBs made in China, we assemble them in Australia, and then we ship over finished units to America. Like it's quite the trip around the world, just because of how things have panned out with our customer base. But yeah, I would just hope that you could ask if that's something that's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. I also feel like if their branding or their slogan or anything,
I like that.
logo, any of that, that's the new thing. Yeah, anyway, like if anything like that is like they are pushing it really hard for made in the USA, really big, that they have whatever, like it's in their ads and stuff, then I would hope that they would truly be. But like you just said, there's so many things like I never realized, and I think it was just until I got into the whole the industry of it, of like not thinking about where certain things come from like the guys at RJM, like they're like, we have a Deleon GT22 controllers, those ones that have all the little LED screens. I was like, oh shoot, are you just waiting to get them from someone? Like, yeah, they're overseas. Like those types of things are, they just can't possibly be made here because of the types of facilities. And if they were made, they were like, they would be 3 times the price of what they already are. Like it's just, I mean, if you think of 22 screens, I think they said they originally like $20 a screen, LED screen, and went up to like $80 or $90.
Oh,
like
over
over COVID.
Yeah.
And then that $90, or it was over 100, I think. It never went down. They just kept it there. So when you're having to put 22 screens in at $100, like that's a lot of money. Like that's per screen.
Even if they went up $1, that's significant on your base cost. Like that's oh man.
Yeah. So like when people are like, oh my gosh, this pedal's so expensive, there's so many things that I used to not factor in. Like especially this stuff that does all these like, I mean anything that's out there that does all these crazy amount of extra effects and sounds and parallel and series and routing and touch screen and stuff. It's just like, I can understand why they would want to source. I just think like I just pulled up this Vemuram pedal, this Landau pedal, and it says made in Japan. So like it, they're saying what it is. But there are companies I have seen where it says made in the USA, and I only know of one. But
they're based in Japan, like so that
Are they? Oh,
yeah.
See, I don't know. But
I mean, I don't know what the laws are there, but I guarantee you that it's still got
Chinese
all
components.
the parts have to be Chinese. Because there's just not an alternative. Like there's it's you're buying your pots. They're probably using Alpha pots like most of us do. Those are made in Taiwan. They're probably
even like the little chips and stuff, like
all the ICs.
Little chips,
they're all made. They're all made in China.
And
I could say Texas Instruments on it, but it's made in China.
Exactly. And like I know a couple friends companies that they have all the machines to assemble everything, and it's they are cutting out their enclosures and bending them and power coding. They're doing everything. But like when they'll get these tubes of components and they're so small. It looks like a pepper. Like it looks like a grain of pepper. How small it is. And I'm like, clearly that's not being produced. Like, so like it's also the capacity and the capability and the machinery to build some of these things, I feel like is not, it could be US based. But yeah, no, I think I didn't know about Venmirion being actually over there, so that makes perfect sense. But like all those, the pots, like you said, the pots, the foot switches, and I think that's a big thing too. Is a lot of people don't realize on like these triple pull switches, it's like how the audio goes through the whole switch. I've had a couple people that they didn't know that that's what it did, and so it would make sense that there are a few manufacturers overseas that just supply it to everyone. So yeah, no, I agree. I think saying designed or assembled is a better, or assembled is a much better approach than saying made in the USA or whatever.
But even with your friends, Brian, that fold their enclosures, have their own pick and place and ovens and all that, like,
yeah,
if you want to get picky, like, where are they getting their aluminum from? Where are they getting their steel?
Yeah.
Where are they, like, there's a very good chance, and I'm not saying these people are buying them from overseas, but a lot of these raw materials are bought from China.
And metal-wise, everything is coming from. It's just impossible.
That's just where this whole thing is. Depending how deep you want to go, I think it is really tricky, and that's where I just think it comes down to the tolerance of the manufacturer. Like, I mean, when we first started out years ago, the PCB designs were like all the routing of the circuits on the PCB before it even gets manufactured, like in the CAD stage, was all done by me. I have no clue what I'm doing to the degree of an electrical engineer as far as, best practices for circuit design. So that very quickly got handed off. But I could get that elementary, to put it kindly, PCB design, and I could get that made in America. I could get it populated in America with Chinese parts, but populated in America. I could do all of that. But I'm starting out with a design that could be drastically improved. And no matter where it's made, that pedal could be made much better by starting out from the beginning with a much better design, following, tried and true practices for circuit design and all that. And so that's where, I mean, yeah, the Made in America thing, it is a thing, and people love it, but it by no means guarantees you quality. I think it just guarantees supporting a little bit more the American economy. And I think another thing, maybe we can get into this later in a sec. I want to break for an ad here, but I think with your example, Mason, of Chinese companies supposedly not even factoring in labor, I also think there's a moral component to that side of things. And I know as soon as Goodwood is big enough, I want to be able to go over to China and actually inspect some of the factories that we are using, because there's this other thing of like, how are the workers actually being treated? And again, you can treat your workers horribly anywhere in the world, but I think it's easier to get away with that kind of, how are people being treated that are manufacturing your products in China? Are they actually on a wage that they can live on? Are they working, reasonable hours a day? Are they of a certain age? Like, all this stuff, I think, comes into play. So yeah, I think there are a lot of factors to made in China versus made in another country. But I'll let you guys stew on that semi-dark note as I get into our sponsors for the episode today. Some of the guys that do make this episode possible, before we get back into the conversation about USA versus China versus other countries, company number one is located in America. This is the Guitar Sanctuary. Currently, this is where Brian is seated. He's got boards around him for days, maybe even weeks, Brian. I don't even know how far you've got boards in your shop, but Brian is always working on 8-9 pedal boards on the go. And in the Guitar Sanctuary, you can buy your pedals wherever they are manufactured. They are sure to be great pedals at the Guitar Sanctuary. Your amps, your guitars, they are located at McKinney, Texas, if you are ever in the area, but they are also on the line, as the cool kids call it, on at guitarsanctuary.com, and you can check them out. Everything they have to offer: Goodwood Audio, Vertex, and incredible companies. Obviously, once you buy your gear, you can get Brian Omilion to set it up for you if you can find a spot in his very busy calendar. So check out the guitarsanctuary.com. You will be very glad you did, and pop in and say hello if you are ever in McKinney, Texas. Also want to tell you guys about Neural DSP. They make incredible plugins. As you know, they make the Quad Cortex, which I actually have a Quad Cortex board on my bench right now on a quite a small creation board, and it is packed with great features inside the Quad Cortex, running any effect you can think of in series, in parallel, per preset. The board I'm working on has an external expression pedal, which you can change to do wah, volume, mix controls across delays and reverbs, whatever you want. You can do it with the Quad Cortex with built-in amps, plugins, and there's actually a code that you guys can use, Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, to get 30% off of all of the plugins on neuraldsp.com. So long as they are 90 days or older, you can get 30% off. That's 70% away from free, as we like to say on the podcast. Lastly, Cortex Control, the desktop editor for Quad Cortex, is now live and very much usable and very helpful for deep editing on the Quad Cortex. So check out neuraldsp.com to view more of everything I just chatted about. The list is long. Neuraldsp.com.
And the Morgan amps are now available. The Morgan Amp Suite. They just exceeded 90 days. So now they're eligible. If you like amp suites
discount
in sweet tone, there you go.
Amp suites for sweet amps. Neuraldsp.com. Check them out. So lots to talk about, obviously, in the conversation around China and America. Mason, I want to throw it back to you now that I'm done my spiel on the Guitar Sanctuary and Neural. I left it on a dark note. Do you guys want to talk about going into that moral aspect, or should we just move on?
Well, I think even at the highest levels, like I don't remember how many years ago it was. It was a few years ago, but even I think Apple, again, I keep going back to them as sort of, the kind of being the upper echelon of overseas manufacturing. I think that they had, I think some of the people that were working in that factory were jumping off the building or something like that, and that's not to make light of it, but I think that the working, I don't know that this was necessarily Apple, but the contract manufacturer that they were using, had created an environment as such where, it was not great and people were unhappy. And I always think the challenge would be in trying to investigate that. I don't know how you would know, I don't know how you would know if it was happening unless it was like really obvious. I would suspect that when people are getting tours of these factories, they probably are trying to be as discreet as possible with those sorts of things. And so I'm not sure how that works. I know that a lot of American companies are or have that as a tenet of their brands and their sort of brand philosophy, and so they will seek out manufacturers that will meet a certain ethical code that they agree with. And I know that the Chinese or many of them are trying to mirror maybe some of that because they know that that will be the difference between major company X choosing them, that they're courting as a potential long-term partner. So I wonder if maybe things, at least to a degree, are sort of shifting there because their audience wants to see those sorts of things in place. Although I would presume that in early days, let's say in the 80s and 90s when this was really ramping up, I'm sure that there probably had to be some real, I think everybody had gotten into versions of this. I know Nike had gotten busted for, child labor stuff. And that doesn't mean that Philip Knight is hiring children to stitch up shoes. But I think that the contract manufacturers, had a much looser interpretation of child labor laws than we do in America. And this is, we see that as a consequence there.
Yeah, it is tricky, and I think that's where, especially in those examples, the headlines can point to the company who maybe didn't do their due diligence, maybe they did, and then things changed after they left. Like, there's obviously a whole bunch of factors that go into it, but I
Yeah, I'm
do
sure
think,
none of them go in with that. Like none of them are like,
yeah,
like let's find,
I would hope
these
not.
kids. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think that I would be very surprised if any of them are coming in with that intention. I would suspect that it's probably things that are, the discretion of the manufacturer and, wanting to, if they have a contract that they're making a certain amount per product, they're probably trying to figure out how to lower their costs and, to keep, bodies assembling. And I don't like to think that it would be that reductive, but there's certainly examples of that.
I was also curious what you guys thought, or if you've ever used this yourself, which is a online retailer, mass retailer called Alibaba or AliExpress, which has basically brought. So Mason, you were mentioning earlier that a lot of people, the factor that makes it hard to buy from China is the amount of quantity you have to buy, the amount of runs you have to do for a pedal. You need to buy 10,000 of this type of component to actually even be able to get a quote, whatever it is. Alibaba is basically like an eBay for Chinese manufacturers, or especially AliExpress. And you can go on and say, I want, this component for my PCBs, or I want this guitar cable, whatever it is. And anyone can go on there and buy it. And anyone can go on there and get samples. And I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are about making, I don't know how old Alibaba is, maybe 15 years, 10, 15 years, but making this widely available to anyone. And the quality that we have been talking about, sometimes it's great quality, sometimes it's not. I have found that on AliExpress, I sometimes get samples if I can't find the part anywhere else. Like the other day, a customer of mine, as an example, pointed out, the EIAJ plugs, that the 24 volt plug that you get from Strymon Zuma to daisy chain the next Zuma, or Chalks to daisy chain. I always get asked, is there a right angle soldered version of that plug that you can just terminate a cable and then solder a right angle on? I've never been able to find one until a customer pointed one out on AliExpress.
Ooh.
Cost wise, guess what I paid for one unit to get it shipped to me in Australia?
Just one connector?
Bucks.
Just one plug plus shipping.
$60.
I'm gonna say over 100.
It was $1.50.
What?
For the plug and $1 for shipping, and it arrived 2 weeks later.
Can you send me that link?
And how were the samples?
Off me, Brian. No, I actually will. I definitely will. But I mean, like that's an example of like I can't get domestic shipping in Australia for less than $12, and to get that shipped from China, $1.50 for the plug, $1 for shipping to get a sample sent over. Now, granted, when that plug arrived, it was like the quality was pretty average, but I can't find that plug anywhere else. So now I have to think, is it worth it to sell this plug? Is the quality good enough to actually survive tours? And I now need to go through, the process of actually testing this thing and like bashing it up and trying to get it to fail and seeing where the failure point is. But as an example, like I did not go on there as Goodwood Audio. I went on there as just an individual that was looking for a part, and I got it within 2 weeks for about $2.50 US. I'm curious what you guys think about companies like this that give, for now, the hobbyist builder, pedalboard builder, pedal builder, whatever it is, they now have access to these parts that are quality is questionable at times, good at others, and downright terrible at other times. What you guys think about that?
I mean, I would say, especially if you're prototyping or learn, do they sell connectors and stuff on that? I'm assuming
anything you can think of.
Okay,
it's not music industry specific.
Got
it is just a giant marketplace.
As you can tell, I've not used the site before because I'm trying to guess. But I would say, I feel like in the beginning of me starting builds, if I had the opportunity to order from somewhere like that, they get plugs and stuff super cheap, to learn how to do my soldering and stuff, and like, because there's definitely times I ruined a lot of plugs from soldering them and then being wrong, or cutting some some of the connectors I use. I have to cut the ring lead inside because it's super long, and like just little things like that I was learning. The amount of MIDI like switchcraft right angle plugs that I destroyed accidentally because the pin, like I broke the pin off, that kind of stuff.
That's an expensive mistake, by the way.
It's
The MIDI plugs, those are like, what, $12 a piece right now?
They're $12 a piece at even our cost. So, and they're so small that they would break off.
Yeah,
which sucked. So then I would have to clip all the leads. I would have to solder, like I would have to basically shorten all the leads and then solder to the. It was a whole thing. I hated it. But having a thing like that, I think starting out, getting stuff, and I'm assuming you could probably get like a soldering iron and that kind of like soldering station.
I've never done
stuff.
that. I'm sure
you could get all sorts.
I'm
of
sure
stuff.
you could, because like the ones like I have, like the Weller that I have, like it's over $100, and I think someone that wants to start learning something, that might be intimidating because it's $100 just for the thing, just to build the cables. But I think starting out what I was trying to say was I would do it because I'm trying to save money to see if it's something I want to do. And then, if I am horrible at building that guitar pedal, then I only wasted $20-$30 or whatever it would cost. But I think in the long-term longevity, after you've realized, yeah, this is the pedal I'm going to build, then take it up the next level and order more quality parts, or start searching for that special diode to build another clone.
Well, Mason, before I do my next thing, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I have bought stuff from there, and you can also use it to like have people bid on things. So,
Yep.
for example, for the 2.1 millimeter barrel and 2.5 millimeter barrel pre-made molded cables, I had multiple companies bid on. I don't know if I used AliExpress or Alibaba, but I was able to find a really good one. Like I had companies bid, I had companies send samples, and I was very particular about like the way that I wanted the molded end to look in terms of its profile. Because we all know that certain brands molded, DC power cables can stick out a lot further than others.
Gigantic.
Yep, absolutely.
And so I kind of gave them the smallest version as sort of the template, and said like, can this be done? Can you do this? And a bunch of them sent kind of samples of what they currently did. And one of them just happened to be even smaller slightly than the one that I had suggested. And so we ended up using that. So like when you buy the Vertex, power cables, we're using this particular company that makes them for us, and we buy 2,000 of them at a time or something like that, and we can get them also in like 50-inch lengths, so we can pretty much build any length custom DC cable. Obviously one side is re-terminated, so they're just basically they're molded on one side and then just blunt cut on the other. But we've used it for that. And there's no company in the USA that would make this for us. And whether you're buying Strymon or Voodoo Lab or whoever, they're not making those in their factory. They are being made by somebody overseas now to their spec, and that's all great. And that's what we have done too. But there's just nobody here that would make that. If we were buying it from here, we would be buying it from somebody at a USA price, and they would be turning around and doing the exact same thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we've used it for that, and that's been great. I would say though, like in your case, Grant, where you mentioned that connector, I would imagine though, if you went to buy it as a customer, you couldn't just buy like 4 units. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but my understanding of them is like they'll have some sort of minimum quantity where it's like, okay, great, you got the sample, you want to buy more. Our
they only had like 2 in stock,
500, or something
Yeah.
like that. And so for the regular person, I don't know whether that would be even though if it was a savings on one, they probably don't need 500, or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
And I mean, like right now, as we speak, I have a big order coming over from China for a bunch of stuff that we've been using manufacturers for quite a while. And that's the one thing I would say as a slight side. If I ever want to buy something from China, I have learned my lesson to get many samples. And then you pick from the physical sample. You never, ever order in quantity blindly without actually seeing it in person and inspecting it. And so once you find a good manufacturer, you stick with them, and you know what you want, the quality that you're going to get, all that. So currently I have a big order coming. I think it's like 300, 400 kilos worth of stuff on a ship, and that'll come to the States, but we had to buy in big quantity, and to ship it, I mean, just in shipping alone, I think we're spending $600 just to ship everything.
Wow.
But the numbers still work out in our favor rather than buying everything, domestically in the States, when most of those companies will have just done exactly what I would have done anyways, which is, like you said, buy from China, mark up the price, and then sell to me at another marked up price. So it is doable, but a time where it didn't work for ages, we were looking for a new transformer for our products. And so I'd been buying from a U.S. Manufacturer called Mouser. They are another marketplace. Buying from them, paying lots of money for the transformer, which was working great. I wanted to get better specs. So I went to China and I got 6 different individual samples, put them all on scopes into our products, measured distortion, measured like everything we could measure. Every single one of them failed horribly. And so we weren't able to buy anything in that case. Like I couldn't find a good manufacturer for a transformer. And so there absolutely are times where you're going to have to find another alternative. I don't think you can, and maybe if I would have stuck with it, I probably would have found a great manufacturer, probably in Taiwan. But that wasn't the case this time around. So I think you do really have to set your quality standards before you buy, because it is really easy to see the markup you can make on an inferior product and just, get lost in, I'm going to make so much money. And then the quality of your brand just dives downhill in the meantime. And so that's where I think you do really need to be careful. And the last thing I want is for people to listen to this. Everyone rushes to Alibaba, buys all this, cheap crap. And not that everything on there is cheap crap, but doesn't do their due diligence in getting good quality samples. And now we're being resold stuff in America that just is not up to par and will not last a tour and is horrible to solder to. And you get cold joints and all these factors that can then come into play. It is not it's not a fix all to making your brand profitable. It's a lot of work buying from China if you want to do it well. At least in my experience.
I would just assume, so like I've never had to buy from in China, obviously. I don't do parts like that or anything, but I would assume that if say you buy 500 of those EAJI, however, EI, whatever it's called, EAI, whatever, yeah, those ones. Yep. Say you buy 500 of them and 200 of them are bad, like then you have to go through that whole process of getting them back over to that company overseas,
which they won't do.
And that's not going to happen.
It's not.
And that's the thing.
But you'll still come out ahead. I will say that.
Yeah,
you will still come out ahead. If like half of them are gone, you'll still make more money on that product, which is a kind of a sad truth, I guess, in one instance. But yeah, and that's where that company. This is part of the learning curve of buying overseas. You need to have like what is a blem, what is considered a defective product, and have agreements in place. And you only really learn this by making mistakes and big bets that have failed. Then you really learn how you have to communicate, it's a lot of due diligence. And that's where I think it can be very frustrating buying from China if your main goal is to save money. I think for smaller
companies, it doesn't make sense. Like I think if you're a small pedal company, I think you have to get to a certain size before buying there makes sense, because again, the quantities are going to be higher.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to do the volume, I think, to get the real savings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Should we break for another ad and then we can kind of finish up some final thoughts?
Yeah, that's good with me. Well, our final two sponsors are going to be the guys over at Besttronics, or also known as BTPA.com. They have, as we were just talking about, all sorts of connectors and stuff. They're my one-stop shop for all my connectors and for my DC connectors, any special type of audio constructed loom stuff that I need. I get it from the guys over at BTPA, Brad. They're awesome. They're very quick. They're only an hour behind me in time, or an hour ahead. I can't remember, but they are easily accessible to get to and talk to. They are very kind, great people. I have called Brad. I think I called Brad like 24 times in one day, just trying to get something certain, figure it out. Kept calling him back. He helped me figure it out. Very well informative, knowledgeable, helps out every way he can, and if not, he helps recommend the best options. So I highly encourage and recommend you guys go check out BTPA. Use the code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, for 10% off. This is a great savings. Get some high quality parts and connectors. Start building today. Final guys are going to be the guys over at MonoCreators.com. Mono is great for their high quality boards, bags, power supplies. They have gig bags, backpacks. I think I said I have like 3 or 4 different cases from them, just because their quality is amazing. And I can't recommend Mono anymore, any more that I already am, because they're just so great at what they do, and you'll never be disappointed in their stuff. They have new slimmer power supplies that go underneath their boards, their new rail board that they have, some angle boards, some carbon fiber boards. Check them out today. Use the discount code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 10% off at monocreators.com.
Awesome. So to wrap up today, I just want to recap a few things. I think that for the most part, it sounds like we don't have any serious objections to made in China or made overseas. Obviously, as we mentioned, you can get crap quality if you want crap quality. Like if you just want something cheap, they can do it. But you can also have amazing stuff made there. And I think, you can see that from, let's say, the Eventide stuff is incredible. That's made in China. The UA stuff is really great. That's made in Malaysia. There are countless examples of pedals that do not lack in quality, that don't lack in tone, that are made overseas. And I can understand, for somebody that is, a patriotic and wants to keep jobs here, wants to buy stuff that's made in America. And I appreciate that. And, it's admirable. I think it's great. I think also understanding that there can be very little of that that's actually done here. I don't know if that changes your perspective on this. I just think it's something to understand, is that there really is no such thing as a fully made in USA product as it relates to guitar pedals anymore. It is a patchwork of various countries. It is a United Nations of like various companies that exist from all over the world to make a pedal come together. In my attitude in making pedals is like, I want to choose the part that sounds the best, that's going to be the best for the job, that's going to give the customer the best price. So if there are 2 products that are identical, 2 parts that are identical, and it will decrease the cost to the customer as a consequence to choosing one versus the other, I'm typically going to go with the cheaper one if it's the exact same quality, sound, etc. Because I think as much as we talk about wanting, or people talk about wanting made in USA, they also are, I would say, when it comes to voting with their wallets, they typically will not spend more for pedals. Some people will, but I think that they are the exception. Most people want value, and you can provide better value to your customer by giving them a high quality product that is competitively priced. And these are the types of trade-offs that we make all the time when we're manufacturing, to say, okay, here's two choices. They are both great options, but one is significantly cheaper. We're going to go with the one that's significantly cheaper because we want to make sure that we're meeting a price point. And I think that this is something that manufacturers do all the time. And they have to do it, because there's rarely somebody that wants to pay $350 for something that they can pay $200 for. And these are, again, just challenges in manufacturing. And maybe for you as an individual, this is the wrong choice. Maybe it needs to be more, and I can appreciate that. But I think ultimately the biggest disruptor that will determine whether somebody will buy or not is price, not where it's made. And that's the unfortunate reality of what we're dealing with.
I mean, that was well said.
I agree. There's been, there's those times where like you have a bunch of stuff, like when I'm reordering parts from Creation, I'll put 500 connectors in the cart, and
you say, make sure they're made in USA.
Well, I know where they're made, so, but I put, say, 500 in the cart, but then I see that number of how much those 500 connectors, and I'm like, I could just do 200 this time. But I can understand where, like, having that option to compare and going with if they're all the same quality, obviously you're trying to save the meat, those margins and everything. And as someone that had a couple junction boxes made from Grant and the guys at Goodwood, which did an amazing job, I was loving it and loving the size and everything. But like to know like the price and what it takes to go into it, and I'm thinking like, man, this is crazy to think how my box is so minuscule and compact and almost no features compared to some of the other stuff that he's doing with the interfacer and all the stuff down to the rivets. I mean, down to the rivets that you guys use, the black rivets on everything. It's just so interesting when you start to put together, like when you look at a pedal and you're like, oh, this probably costed, this is a $300 pedal or whatever, and I bet it only cost them this, but they don't think about all the little things that go into it, like the switches, the jacks, the power connector, the internal stuff. So it's a very interesting thing to see how, like,
or the design, the intellectual property
of it. Yeah, absolutely. The design of it. I mean, Grant and I talked about a box, and it was a simple in and out with an audition thing. So simple, but it still took us a little while to figure out and get the right specs and everything. So I can't even imagine what it takes to get a Vertex Boost designed start to finish, like the process that it takes and the stuff that goes involved, or
even when it's made, like, right? Just converting the Mark 1 to the Mark 2. Like, we weren't having to redesign the circuit. But we were having to redesign the circuit board to make it fit in a smaller box and make sure that it sounds the same, and redesign the enclosure. That could be months,
Well, that's like when people see, like, even JHS, like, they're like, oh, they just came out with the same version. It's just like they just added a red remote thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm pretty sure that one circuit just to add that still takes weeks. Trial and error, the redesign, like there's way more stuff to put into consideration. So I'm on the same board plane, whatever, because we're talking about overseas, but like I'm just like, I don't think it's wrong. I think you have to, as a business person, you have to go with what you're feeling is the best for your business and for your customers, and ultimately they're trusting your decision too. So if you decide that those are the best parts and components for your board or for your product, then go for it. And me, as even a consumer, when I'm buying stuff, I'm not opening this up and trying to read these little dials and be like, oh, this better say USA. Like, I'm not doing that, but I'm trusting, off of what you're wanting for your company. So yeah, no, I think it's been a fun conversation and enlightening to kind of understand. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much goes into designing one patch bay, a junction box, a boost pedal, just like the amount of aspects, even down to the packaging and the boxing and how it fits. It's just nuts. There's just so much involved in it.
Yeah, I've been working on a new product, junction box, and I started the new product in 2021. And granted, it hasn't been my full-time job because there's a lot of other things to get done, but we've been making constant revisions to it. And it's the most it's a complicated product as far as I'm concerned and the people I've hired. But it has taken, I think we are into it for 10 grand in labor alone right now. Just trying to get revisions and trying to, you fix one thing and you get a board printed. Just getting the board printed and populated it's $150 US. And then you get it sent over that caused a new problem downstream. Then you have to rejig it, find the problem, new board printed. And it just so much time
Oh my gosh.
with a new product. And it's just incredible, man, how much money, time, effort. Obviously I love it and it's such a fun process, but it takes ages. And I just think all that money at some point has to be recouped. I have to make that money back. And that'll have to come out of the profits of each individual unit sold for probably a couple of years. It'll just takes a long time. But I don't think any of us, if our only concern, I can hopefully speak for the three of us, if our only concern was to get rich, we would have picked another industry. There's a love for what we do that, supersedes just making a buck. Obviously we have to feed our families and pay our employees and make a profit, but there is something really fun about the struggle along the way. And part of that struggle is honestly right now, we're changing even just how we order parts, all of our BOMs and everything. And a lot of those parts come from China, especially circuit board related stuff. But that's part of the struggle. It's hours every week. And so I think obviously you guys know from listening to my opinion on this, I do not have a problem with ordering from China. I do have a problem with ordering low quality stuff from China and other companies ordering low quality stuff, pawning it off as being the highest grade product available when it's absolute trash. So I think it's great. I think it's a part of our industry and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I think every made in USA pedal is going to have some sort of overseas component built in. Like Mason said, it's a United Nations. It's a global product if you're into electronics, and you just can't really avoid that. But
definitely
there's
no getting around it. There's nothing that's fully made
there
here.
isn't.
There just isn't.
I think it wasn't. You guys might know more than me. Wasn't Biden, especially during COVID, putting in a huge effort into trying to get a chip manufacturer on the ground in USA? And it is billions with a B of dollars to set up one factory for making chipsets. It's the cost for this stuff is astronomical. The clean rooms you have, if there's any dust in there, the chipsets are ruined. And it's so specialized. So it's not as simple as why don't we just get our own chip manufacturers in America? The cost to get going, the barrier to entry is gigantic. And so right now it's just easier to buy from established chip manufacturers in China. And even if they were set up in America,
people don't want to pay $100 for their
exactly. Even if they were made in
455
America, doesn't mean they're affordable. And that's the other side of it. So it's not a simple fix to just rectify this, as some people might see it, issue. I don't see it as an issue, but it just kind of is what it is right now. But yeah.
Well, I'm really interested from the audience perspective. I mean, I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of commentary here, either in the chat or in the comments below, because I think that there are still a lot of misconceptions about what that means, or people maybe will defend their brand. They're like, but brand X, they're made in the USA, damn it. And it's kind of I think that what we've been saying is assembled with foreign and domestic parts or something like that.
Yeah.
Because that's the truth. I mean, there's parts that are from here, like the metal, and even that, I guess technically the metal was probably from overseas, but it's bent and powder coated, or
I mean, even stuff like this, like these XLR, DC, like all those
Neutrik.
yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that Neutrik, supposedly, if you're getting the Neutrik branded one, they say that they're made in wherever it is, Liechtenstein
or these guys.
But the Rian ones are definitely China. That's probably a Switchcraft one, right?
Yeah, they're the isolated ones, which
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, the
It's so hard nowadays.
Switchcraft ones are I think made in Chicago.
Nice,
or so they say. So some of the jacks are you
know.
can get, but most people that are using those types of jacks, like, and I don't think this is like telling on anybody. This is not an uncommon thing, but like on a Strymon, it looks like a Neutrik jack. I think that the brand that they use is called Telelong. So it's like it's like a Neutrik stereo jack
Neutrik
replica.
inspired.
And there's a lot of those out there.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon. That doesn't even mean that they're bad. You know, there can be great replicas of common stuff, you know, that's out there.
You just
Again,
described
if you want
every
to buy
overdrive pedal out there.
yeah, if you want a great
replicas.
quality you know, jack, it doesn't need to say Switchcraft on. There are alternatives out there that are affordable, and then some of them are absolute garbage, and will, you know, so it depends on what it is that you're doing.
Mhm.
But thanks, gentlemen. Thank you for the conversation today. I think it will be really interesting to see like kind of what people's perspectives are, and I don't think, you know, we're not trying to necessarily change your mind about things, just giving you some insight from a manufacturing standpoint, and just understand this is the reality of where we are in our business. Yeah.
All right.
All right, guys. See ya.
See ya.
See ya.